This is the SEC Insider Hit. Presented by your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local. Go with a home team.
Oh, man. Crazy things happening in Tuscaloosa. Good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show. ESPN 105.9 the Zone. Love the feedback on what you guys are, what y'all are going to cook for the Super Bowl. And with, high of 60 and sunny, fire up the grill or the smoker early in the morning to get ready for that 5:30 kickoff. We've had a couple of people invite Blake and out of Super Bowl parties, so that's cool too. I may have to hit one pregame. Once the game kicks off, I got to be at the house. That may make me lame, but it is what it is. Out of Bounds is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. And our next guest, Brad Edwards, 25 years at ESPN, University of Alabama Crimson Tide alum. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Brad Edwards, good morning. How you been, buddy?
Oh, I've been pretty well. Survived the Arctic blast over the weekend. We had a Saturday morning. I know it's been cold down there too, but Saturday morning we had temps below zero with wind chill in the minus 30s.
Good.
Which is bad enough if you don't have to go outside. In this case, I have a dog that is taking some medication that makes him drink a lot of water, so he's constantly having to go out and relieve himself. And just time after time, I had to keep going out, standing there, watching him do his thing, and then just, come on, man, get back inside, inside. But yeah, I mean, it's a different world when you start to get it, and I mean, you think about not that they've played a whole lot of football games and weather quite that bad, but you have a better appreciation for it. I'll say this. The coldest show that I ever went to, all my years doing College Game Day on ESPN Radio, the coldest show that we ever had was, you may remember a while back, Northwestern and Illinois played a game at Wrigley Field.
Yes.
It was a really unique thing, so we went there for that. And neither team was very good, but it was just because it was cool. They're playing in a just legendary baseball stadium, and it was in November, and it was freezing. And it was just one of those where you just can't even feel your feet. You can't move your fingers, and your cheeks are frozen. It's hard to talk, like one of those type things. And it certainly didn't give me more of an appreciation for Big Ten football, but it gave me more of an appreciation for Big Ten football fans, right? Like just the fans, and to see them on TV now in some of those games, and it's packed student section. It's like you don't realize what it takes. And that's dedication to your team to be out there. The teams might not be that good, but the fans are dedicated.
Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Brad Edwards, 25 years at ESPN. Who was with you on the show at that time when you were freezing at Wrigley?
That was probably Ryan Russillo as the host. Trevor Maddich was the other analyst with me for every year I was on the show.
Right.
So only the host changed. I think that was back when it was Russillo.
And where were y'all set up at Wrigley?
Like across the street from. It was kind of. I would say we were across the street from like the third baseline. Whatever. Like, I guess the Cubs probably have the third base dugout. I'm assuming that's their, home, it's usually the home dugout. So we're kind of like across the street from where the Cubs dugout would have been.
Okay. Wow. And
that side of the stadium.
Your show was like, it was a marathon. It was like 6 hours on Saturday, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, we had a 7-hour show, and we had to get there like 2 hours before the show started. So hey, look, our crew was there long before we were, and they were there long after us, taking everything down. So I have a lot more sympathy. Not to mention, look, they try to help us out, by putting some kind of heaters up there and giving us these little hand warmers to put in our pockets and stuff. And those guys didn't have all that stuff. So
right.
If there's anyone that deserves a raise for being out there, it wasn't us, it was them.
So do you remember a hot one like down here, maybe in Baton Rouge or Gainesville, where y'all pulled like a second or third week of the season, and it was
so
90?
the hottest one would have been in Dallas or Arlington. Remember when LSU and Oregon opened the season at Jerry World? I think it was the 2011 season when LSU just dominated like all the way up until losing the national championship game to Alabama. But I believe that's which season that was. It was a scorcher, as it often is in the DFW area. First weekend of September, and I remember that was one where TV game day was in the same location, and they were having to they were having to put like tubes of like from the air conditioner up the backs of the chairs of the guys on the set. Wow. in order to try to keep them cool during the show. I mean, fortunately on radio, like you can just kind of walk around a little bit while you're doing it. And your radio show, you're always on camera, but for us, we could, I could say something and then, okay, Trevor starts talking and I know Trevor's going to talk for about a minute. So I'll go walk over and I'll go, grab a drink out of the cooler, come back.
Sure.
Whatever. And you could do that stuff on radio. You can't do it on TV.
Unbelievable. Wrigley, coldest, and the hottest was Dallas, Fort Worth, and Arlington for LSU and Oregon. Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. All right, so Bama's been in a meltdown mode for a while, and I just want to be honest, there's a lot of teams in the SEC fans that have been enjoying some of this. I'm in constant communication with Ron Fowler, who has a show in Tuscaloosa. And so now we've gone back-to-back years. Bama didn't even make it this year, Brad. And now they're the hunter instead of the hunted because Kirby Smart has leapfrogged Bama right now, and they are the program in college football. Now, what do you hear from your Alabama colleagues, alums, and so on about where this is headed?
Yeah, I don't know that I hear anything that would be surprising or out of the ordinary. Obviously, this is the first time during this Saban run that there's no doubt that someone has passed Alabama. You had the time where Clemson won 2 national titles in the 3-year span, but Alabama won the one in between the two that Clemson won, and they also won the one before Clemson started, and then they won again before Clemson ever won again. So, I mean, there were people at a certain point that were trying to make an argument that, maybe Clemson has passed Alabama or at least caught them. But in this case, when you win 2 in a row, then there's no question that you are now the team to beat. And Georgia is. And so Alabama, like you said, they are the hunters. They're not the hunted. Georgia is the hunted in the SEC and nationally. Now, I mean, to keep it in perspective, Alabama still finished number 2 and number 5 in those 2 seasons. And it's not like they fell off a cliff. But you're looking at a lot of unknown going into the season because it's not just that, okay, now they're, clearly the number 2 team in the SEC. But on top of it, they are replacing both coordinators. They are replacing their starting quarterback. And where do they go from here? I don't know, but it's one of those that you feel like if this were to result in another season that they didn't reach the college football playoff or they don't win the SEC, then I think the people who want to declare the dynasty over really have a lot of ammunition. At this point, look, the best argument you have is simply that Saban's getting older. Because the results on the field have, while it's shown that Alabama is not at the level of Georgia, it's not like the rest of the country has caught up to Alabama. So I think you got to go one more. Look, and the other thing about it is that since Saban got there, they have never gone more than 2 years in a row without winning the national title, and that's where they are right now. 2 in a row. They 2 years in a row they didn't win it, but there hasn't yet been 3 straight years without winning it. And so if they don't do it here, then you can say, okay, this is new ground. This is the longest drought that they've had, and we'll see where it goes. But at this point, for all those who've been hoping for the end of this thing for about 10 years, this is the first time you're finally starting to see just a little twinkle of light at the end of that tunnel.
And Brad, he took advantage, and there's nothing wrong with this, over 12 years, about 12 years. Saban took advantage of Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, and LSU going through a lot of dysfunction with coaches and so on. And while Georgia was good, they weren't ever going to get over the hump and really be what they are under Smart with Mark Richt. So now all of a sudden you flip this, Brad Edwards, and you have Heupel operating at a pretty darn high level at Tennessee. You have Smart, who's running the number one program in the country now. You have Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I fully expect them to win and win big. They're not going to win like Bama and Georgia every year, but I don't put it past Freeze to have good teams every 3 years. And I don't think he'll fall apart at 5-7 or anything. And LSU's got Brian Kelly, who I think they are operating at a very high level under him, much more than Miles Ogeron. And we'll see what Florida does. Do you agree with that? That that 12-year window, and Saban took advantage of it and tip of the cap, but it is totally different today with what I just referenced?
Yeah, I think there is a difference as far as the quality depth of coaching in the SEC and guys who are proven, to have had success at a very high level. That's the difference. Now, during this run that Saban has had, it's not like the SEC has been bad. Like you pointed out, they've been inconsistent, because during this run, you've had other schools in the SEC that have won national championships. And I would, throw on top of that the 2019 LSU team. And it's funny, like there was a lot of conversation right after the national championship game this year about, was this Georgia team the greatest one ever? I don't think they were as good as the previous year's Georgia team. I thought the 2021 team with the dominant defense was actually a little bit better. But people go off, it's a recency bias. They're going off of the score of the national championship game. They forget they were one play away from losing in the semifinal. But regardless, those were two great teams that Georgia had the last 2 years. So 3 of the last 4 years, well, I'll say 4 years in a row. 4 years in a row, the national champion has been a team from the SEC that was a great team, not just the one that happened to come out on top, but a great team when you look at all of the metrics. And only one of the 4 was an Alabama team. So it's not like they haven't had to contend with other great teams in the SEC over that span, but there wasn't the consistency, like you say. LSU was for a lot of that time just a quarterback shy of being that monumental threat to Alabama's dynasty. But they until Joe Burrow, they didn't ever have that guy. And I agree with you that I think Brian Kelly is the best coach in college football who has not yet won a national title at the FBS level. And look, if Les Miles and Coach O can win a national title at LSU, there's no reason that Brian Kelly shouldn't have a few very good chances before he's done. And yeah, I mean, all of this, it's just, what it is if you look at, Georgia's 2023 schedule, and I'm sure you've looked at it.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to find a game on there. Like if Tennessee doesn't drop off too much, if Tennessee doesn't drop off too much, maybe there's a chance they could get knocked off in Knoxville. But that's pretty much it. Like, and Alabama used to have schedules like that where you'd look at it beforehand. There's one game right here that maybe they could lose, but they're just that much better than everyone else. And that's no longer the case, where they're going to be 3 or 4 games on the Alabama schedule. Now, look, I mean, most teams in the country probably have 8 or 9 games they could possibly lose. But Alabama, rather than 1 or 2, we're now going up to 3 or 4 games that they could possibly lose each season. And that just makes it more difficult. But I will also add, that's where the 12-team playoff becomes Alabama's friend.
No doubt.
And I would also add to the friend of Georgia and the friend of Ohio State, any of the teams that have that elite talent, now you have a little bit of a mulligan. It's not just that you could, for the most part, could always afford 1 loss. Now you can probably afford to lose 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got one more year that you can't get away with losing 2. But, last year's Alabama team lost 2 games on the final play, and they would have comfortably been in the 12-team playoff.
Absolutely.
And, would have had a really good seeding. So as much as it may seem like, okay, now it's kind of time to panic, no, I think that the 12-team playoff, is going to offer a little bit of relief to the situation.
He is Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, 25 years at ESPN. We're talking Alabama, where they are, where they're going. Both Bama and Georgia will have new quarterbacks. And so that will be interesting to see who can do it and be in the right spot. I agree with Brad on Georgia's schedule and on Bama's schedule. It's hard to see a loss on Bama's schedule because they host LSU and they host Tennessee. They're 2 road games that Brad referenced that they lost at the very end of the game. They lost on the road, which goes to show that they were not very, very far off. What did you make of, I don't know if it's public humiliation, but Ryan Grubb, I don't want to get too bogged down because I know you're in real estate now, but Ryan Grubb, OC at Washington,
yeah,
it was a public deal where he went, he visited, he said no. Evidently, according to AL.com, there were feelers put out to Joe Moorhead. He wanted to stay as a head coach. Eventually, Saban lands on Tommy Rees, but that's usually not what happens to Bama, much less Saban. For something like that to be played out in the press and media, Brad?
Well, and I would say it happened with both offensive and defensive coordinators. Neither hire, as Kevin Steele, I don't know if he's officially been announced, but all the reports are that Kevin Steele will be the defensive coordinator. That neither one of those feels like it was anywhere close to Saban's first choice. Now, is that, does that mean it's a disaster? Not necessarily, but I'll say this: like you mentioned, Grubb's offense, or the way that his offenses have been schemed, I guess is kind of the best way to say it. His scheme, his philosophy, is very different from Tommy Rees. And now, granted, to some degree, Tommy Rees has always been limited by Notre Dame's personnel, and they had better tight ends and wide outs, and so they were going to be a more traditional style attack because of that. Because if you're playing to your strengths, if you're smart, you're going to play to your strengths, and that's kind of what you're stuck with. So maybe it's unfair to completely judge Tommy Rees on that. And a lot of Alabama fans right now are kind of justifying, okay, this is what Saban's doing. Is like he looked at Georgia, and look, I listened to Saban on the set at halftime of the national championship game. And even a little bit pregame, just talking about what Georgia does with its tight ends and how difficult it is to stop. And I get it. I get like why he would say, hey, maybe we need to go back to that style of play. But the fact that he appeared to want Grubb doesn't necessarily suggest that was his number one objective. Now, this is pretty much known, is that whenever he hires a coordinator, that coordinator doesn't come in and install his own system.
Right.
Like he adapts to Saban's philosophy and what Saban wants to do. So it's not like, the difference in coordinator would have made a huge difference in how the Alabama offense would look. But it would have made some difference. And so you look at both of those hires, and yeah, it does feel like, to a degree, maybe he was settling for a, third option or something like that. And I don't know all the ins and outs of it and who was offered and who wasn't. But neither one seems to be the one that he wanted. Now, on the defensive side, the rumor has been that he really wants Jeremy Pruitt.
Right.
The problem is Pruitt is a target of the NCAA investigation at Tennessee right now, and you just can't hire. He's not hireable as an on the field coach at this point because of that. And so the rumor was that a lot of these other guys that Saban was going after were worried that, hey, I'm going to take the job, and then as soon as the NCAA clears Pruitt, now I'm going to be replaced, because that's the guy he wants. So whether that played into it, I have no idea. But you're right. I mean, it certainly felt like for the first time, Saban was not able to get the coordinator that he wanted on either side of the ball, at least his number one option. And it's even more curious when you consider coming off of one of the great signing classes of all time. So it's not like there's evidence that their talent level is dropping. You would think, I mean, what coordinator wouldn't want to come in and, work with talent that's as good as you're going to find anywhere. But
here's what I think it is, Brad. I think it's, and you may disagree. We got about 2.5 minutes here real quick. I think it's the word is out about the schedule and lack of quality of life, and guys can get paid at every bit of 40 programs around the country. And if they do well, they can parlay that into a head coaching job. You don't have to go through Tuscaloosa like I think we thought you did 12 years ago or whatever. And they don't have autonomy, like you just said. And more coordinators are asking for either all or as much autonomy as they can get. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see that. If you want to show, what you can do, it's a lot easier to display your own system and your own scheme somewhere else where you're given full control. But at the same time, I mean, his coordinators have a pretty good track record of getting head coaching jobs elsewhere. And now the two most recent ones, felt like, I mean, with, Golding, I mean, look, defensive coordinator at Ole Miss is a good job, but it's not Alabama. That was a step down for Golding. But for O'Brien going to offense coordinator of the Patriots, I mean, yeah, he's gone to the NFL, back to the NFL, and it's a step up to some degree, but at the same time, it wasn't really a promotion. He just went from, he went back to one other guy he used to work for. And so this is kind of the first time in a while that, that guys who were with Saban for 2 seasons or more, that neither one of them ended up getting a big career break out of it. And so maybe that is something that was considered by some of those guys too. I don't know.
Yeah. Brad Edwards, 25 years at ESPN, joining us on the Out of Bounds show, the state of the state for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We'll see where it goes in 2023. Great to hear from you. Thanks for your time today. Hope everything's going well. How's the podcast?
Well, I mean, at the end of the season, there's nothing now, so we're shut down, and whether I'll do something again next year remains to be seen. But at the moment, it's just off season. So, like you said, it's real estate.
Did you enjoy doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to be able to just kind of stay involved and be able to talk about it every now and then, and just kind of get into it. It's a hard thing to kind of let go of, but I'm fine with doing something else full time and just kind of having college football as a hobby now.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show. Good to hear from you, bud. We'll talk soon.
All right, thanks for having me.
25 years at ESPN. He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Lunch today brought to you by Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland, Lake Harbor in Ridgeland, Bulldog Burger in Starkville, and Bulldog Burger in Tupelo. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. The show is also brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue, the official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds show. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. Straight ahead, more Super Bowl Nuggets.